Yes, hello. Hi, everyone. Here again for Holistic Vet Sisters on Thursday at 6 o'clock UK time. And we may have a guest. If Reagan arrives, then we will be having Reagan. It's Carnworth, I think, isn't it? So she is one of the herbalist vet sisters from Scotland. So if she hops in, that's why she is due, but she hasn't popped in yet. So we'll just see whether she arrives today. But otherwise, it's myself, Caroline, Canine Nutrition Consultant, and Dr. Lise Hanson, a homeopathic vet. So we can chat to you today. And if you've got questions, do put them in the comments of this video and we will try to get to those as well. I've actually got my phone next to me, Lise, so we can check these comments. So if
Good.
I'm looking this way, that is why, because I'm just
Yeah,
checking
me
for
too, because
everybody's
we've got
comment.
quite a few. I hope that Regan shows up, but let's use the time until she does, because we've had quite a few questions that have been tied
Yeah, we
over
have
from
got.
week to week because we've had
Mhm,
such interesting guests.
mhm.
Um, one of those is Ethan, who asks, let me just find the first one.
To be us.
He says, let me just read the question. My 7-month boxer itches a lot, which must be an allergy, but I can't find what it is right now. I've been thinking it is food related, question mark, to which I've eliminated certain proteins after looking into hot and cold meats and the Chinese medicine method, as he's always warm or hot, drinks a fair amount of water in the evening, and is really energetic, which all indicates to a dog that's hot and needs cold sources. Nothing is working, so I feel like the vet is the route I'm going to have to take rather than try to solve it with diet and herbs. Then he goes on to say he's had a hair mineral analysis done that showed some food allergies that didn't work out, didn't seem to be reliable and didn't make any difference. And finally, he went to a vet and saw a specialist dermatologist who said there was a yeast infection in the ears, and there were rashes on his body, and has put him on a prednisolone course of tablets that initially made him pee a lot and made him very tired. They reduced the dose a bit.
Steroid.
And he's still on them, and he says, do you know about these tablets? And this is Ethan has written several messages, because week by week I've been saying, yes, we will talk about this, and then we haven't had time, and then he's added more information. So we've got a good story there, and I think there's quite a few things to say about that. If I can just start, I think the first thing, I know that lots of dog people who are into holistic approaches go when someone says steroids. And I think that there is absolutely nothing wrong with giving an itchy dog some relief. It's like taking a paracetamol if you've got a blinding headache and you need to be able to exist in your daily life in this body with the symptoms that it's exhibiting. I think it's absolutely fine. The problem with steroids is that it is incredibly effective, sometimes almost miraculously effective, but only short term. So it's short-term relief. It is never a solution. Steroids cannot be continued long-term. Any dog that receives steroids daily, some dogs don't tolerate it at all. Some are okay for a few weeks. Some may even be okay for a few months. But any dogs who continue daily steroids at any dose for longer than that, it's going to make them ill, and really more severely ill than they were to begin with. So it is, per definition, never ever a long-term solution. It's a brilliant short-term respite while you look for a permanent solution. And the problem with itchy dogs and conventional medicine is that a permanent solution isn't available. Allergies in dogs are never cured within the framework of conventional medicine. And what that means is that if you go to your vet with a dog that is diagnosed with an allergy, they will tell you this is incurable, this is a matter of lifelong medication, which is why it's so important to be aware of holistic treatment options, because with the right tools, it is absolutely curable. But I find when in the initial phases, it can be really useful to use symptomatic conventional treatment like steroids while you get the holistic treatment going, so that you've got short-term relief buys you some time. You get that window opportunity to cure the root of the problem so that the dog can become well. And the most important thing is that the dog feels okay the whole time. Just to address this intake of air that may be completely something that I imagine that everybody goes, oh no, not steroids. I think steroids is fine as long as you see it as a short-term thing. The other thing that I really want to say to Ethan is that I really appreciate the way he's thinking about this and trying to think about this in a holistic way and try and understand the imbalance in his dog. But at the same time, I think it's totally unrealistic to be able to cure this by yourself. Even holistic practitioners, doesn't matter whether it's, you know, human homeopaths or acupuncturists or conventional doctors for that matter, make a point of not treating their own family or their own pets. You know, you need a certain distance to be able to see things clearly, and you need to be a professional with a certain distance to be able to treat something like this. There are situations where holistic treatments of all sorts of different modalities are fantastic for home treatment, but a dog with an allergy is just not one of them. You need to go and see a holistic professional. You know, it can be a veterinary acupuncturist or a veterinary homeopath, whatever resonates with you and whatever's available where you live. But don't think that you can cure an allergy by, you know, at home on your own. It's unrealistic, and it's just going to lead to frustration. Those are my main points. Is there anything that else that needs to be added to that, Caroline?
Lots.
Yeah, go on.
It sounded to me as if the steroids had come quite far on in the journey. So I would have thought, I mean, we are where we are now. So I'll talk about how we move forward as well. But for anyone else listening too, when you've got these red flags quite early on, this is an opportunity to do as Lisa suggests and to work with somebody who can really support you, because it's very easy to think that you can just make simple changes with the diet or perhaps buy some probiotics or all the different things that you hear discussed in various social media groups, and that this will be the answer. And then, of course, each time you're waiting for those things to have an effect or not. And so the time is going on, and the root cause of the dog not being in balance is continuing that whole time. So it may have been that had this been worked with earlier on, you could have avoided getting to the stage where the dog really needed steroids. Although I am in agreement that now you've got to that stage, you know, it is
But
nice.
it is also, it's quite a young dog. This is like an 8-month-old dog, so it's not a deeply chronic problem.
Yet something that's been allowed to carry on in a way. I mean, one thing I would say about allergies is that we hear a lot about people talk, and maybe not necessarily this boxer and his guardian, but they talk a lot about it's environmental. And the reason people do that usually is because they themselves have gone through so many different food options and they feel like they've tried everything. So it must be something else environmental. Now, to me, what we have to do really is stop trying to find the offending thing, whether it is outside of the dog and literally outside of the house, or maybe, you know, plug in air fresheners. I'm not saying to use them, obviously we don't want to do that anyway, but you don't want to be looking for this one or two offending things, because that is what takes the time and leads the dog in the meantime to be progressing in whatever it is that's going on for them. So I would work with someone that can look at the root cause. So what potentially is going on with the biome? Was there perhaps late onset vaccinosis, that sort of thing? So you can really start to look at, when did this actually start? What was going on at the time? Was there a stressful event that affected the biome? You know, it can be as simple as that, because everything else just becomes a sticky plaster afterwards, like removing chicken. That's an obvious one. And then people wait to see if it's any different. Or what sometimes happens is that the root cause issue has created an antibody to chicken, even at a young age like 8 months. So then the chicken is removed. So it feels like you've made a difference to the dog, and chicken was the reason that they were itching. And then because the root cause hasn't been dealt with, it's just the next protein that has that antibody created. So you end up going through this cycle rather than dealing with things at the beginning. And when they're young, the younger they are, the more vital life force flow they have, the easier it will be to rebalance them. So I would definitely be starting from the beginning, as much as you can with these dogs, and not waiting to do lots of things yourself to see if you can find the sort of simple answer. I mean, yeah, that's what I would be doing. I mean, it probably, if the dog is 8 months now, this maybe did start when the dog was sort of 4, 5, 6 months. What do you get the impression what's the time
I
frame
don't
you
think
get the
it's, I
impression?
don't think it's clearly,
So
I don't think we know.
it could be that there's a late reaction to the vaccine,
Oh
or
yeah,
to
definitely.
you know, and it could be then that you could work with somebody like Lise, who would, and Adored Beast do a great rebalancer. Actually, I think you can still get it in the UK. I know there was trouble shipping it over after we left the EU, but you should still be able to get something like that, or work with a homeopath who can
I
help
would,
you
yeah, and I was going to say I
to
would do the
clear
letter.
that.
I would stay away from trying to fix
Well,
it
she is a
yourself.
homeopath, isn't she? But yeah, the
No,
lady who
but there is no
created it.
fix
But
all. There is no one. I mean, yeah, sure. No, I don't. Sorry, I don't mean to contradict you. I would just say that my main message, I certainly feel very strongly about that. Rather than try to fix this himself, Ethan should really get to a professional.
I also think, you see, boxers as well, they're known for a sensitive GI tract. I mean, they have lots of pancreatic problems, lots of spleen problems. Yeah, they're known for that sort of thing. So this is an early on sign that you have the opportunity to make a difference. And I think even at this stage now, it's about working with someone who can help you. I mean, yeast itself, there are topical things you can put on that, but again, that's not going to take it from the dog, and really the yeast in the dog is the root cause. So, you know, yes, you could use something nice to relieve that, as well as the steroids. Even something that is natural, not necessarily from the vet, you can use for the yeast. The Dog's First website has some great products for that. But yeah, I would say now is the time to work with somebody, because there is hope, especially with the dog being so young.
Yes, and I think you raised a really, really important point that when dogs come out as allergic at such an early age, vaccines are very often triggers. And it's certainly a point that should be made, that I hope no vet would suggest it, but if any vet suggests vaccinating him, on, you know, I would just absolutely decline. You know, you don't vaccinate someone who's not 100% healthy, but also vaccines are particularly unfortunate when you've got someone who's already suffering from an overreacting, unbalanced immune system that could really, really add to that imbalance. So vaccinating him would be a huge no-no. And I can see that Ethan is listening and has
Hasn't
written.
commented. I can't see the
No,
comments.
but
Oh,
they're in the DM on the Holistic Vet Sisters, which makes it a little bit
right.
more difficult. But
Okay.
he's writing that he's on an elimination diet at the
Yeah.
moment. He's on
Yeah.
steroids and he's on a fish only diet, and he's due to go back after 6 weeks for them to reassess.
But is this a fish only fresh diet, or a fish only processed diet? Because the root cause is really in the gut, and you're not going to shift and transform that gut health if the dog is eating processed food. It's incredibly difficult to do that. It doesn't necessarily mean you've got to feed fresh food in its raw state, Ethan, but if you do need to be feeding fresh food really to get a decent biome shift and change going on.
it
You can cook the food, of course. So
Yeah, it looks like it's a fresh fish diet,
okay,
but I'm not completely
okay.
sure. But there's also there's a lot of confusion about diets, because it's one
Mhm.
thing to change the diet to try to affect the
Well, this
microbiome,
is it.
to see
Yes.
if that can affect the allergy. I don't think that's what their vet is trying to do. I think this is an elimination diet where they're
Yeah.
trying to see if we give
Yeah.
him one thing only, out of the assumption
Exactly.
that this one
Exactly.
thing isn't going to offend him, he's not
Yeah.
going to
Well,
react to that. It's a
yeah.
test to see, does he have a food allergy, yes or no? And the thing to point out in regards to that is that obviously you can't test if a diet change helps if the dog is on steroids at the same time.
It's
So
very
at
difficult.
least for the last month of that trial, before the assessment is made, the dog needs to be on no immunosuppressive medication. Otherwise, the test makes no sense.
Yes, yes, I'm with you on that completely. You're not going to get a true reading. I
No.
mean, I'm not against elimination diets if you're working with somebody, but I just am not a fan of this extensive time frame it takes with the
Mm.
dog's root cause issue not being dealt with, or them just being given the odd probiotic supplement or something else that I'm not saying Ethan has, but somebody has found on Instagram or whatever and ordered.
Yeah.
It's, if you're going to do an elimination diet, you need to be working with someone to check that root cause to begin with, have the biome test done. Sometimes these dogs are deficient in certain nutrients, and until you talk to somebody who knows what they're doing in that framework, then I just feel like we waste time on an elimination diet. I mean, I'm glad it's fish because puppies need so many essential fatty acids. If he had said he was on like an extensive rabbit elimination or something, I would have been like red flag, because they wouldn't have been and even on the fish, I don't know what else is being fed, so it may be that there are some deficiencies there. If there's zinc deficiency, the skin will be affected, for instance. So it's something that needs to be thought about, rather than just trying to find the offensive item, whether that's in the environment or in the dog's bowl.
No, I agree. And I think it's one of those things on paper, I mean, it seems so reasonable, the assumption that, my dog is allergic. Surely I need to find out what they're allergic to so that I can avoid those things. In terms of food allergies, that is sometimes possible, but not in the majority of cases at all, in my experience. But in terms of most allergies, it's just not possible. Dogs, when dogs are reacting with allergies, they are always reacting to a multitude of things. It's never one offending thing, and they are always things that we can't eliminate. If you're reacting to pollen or house dust mites or moles, or
Mm,
people become ill with stress trying to clean their homes and wash everything every week and hoover and steam clean and I don't know what, and I have never seen it make a clinical difference in a dog's allergy symptoms. So I think it's just wasted energy. We cannot clean up the world, and even if we could, the dog would just find something else to react to, because the problem with allergic dogs is not that there is anything wrong with house dust mites or anything wrong with grass or anything wrong with food items for that matter. The problem is that their immune system is unhealthy and wants to overreact, so it'll overreact to whatever it's exposed to. And quite a few of these tests that we can do don't actually, it's a very common misunderstanding that if you do a blood test, look for antibodies and see what the dog is reacting to, that's a sign of an allergy. It is not. It just shows exposure. This is what the dog is surrounded by, and this is what the dog has been exposed to. You can do a similar blood test on a dog that has no allergies at all, and it can look exactly the same. So even though it sounds like such a logical thing to do, find out what it is and remove it, it's practically never possible. What we need to do is address the imbalanced immune system, help it relax. And vaccines are one thing that very much does the opposite, and therefore can trigger allergies, and are very detrimental when we're trying to get the immune system to calm down. We really, really want to not vaccinate unnecessarily at the same time. But it's about getting that immune system to exhale and calm down and find a balance and be able to tell the difference between what's dangerous, what should I attack, and what's actually okay. And which is also the conventional approach, so to speak. It's just a sort of blanket immunosuppressive treatment that turns off the immune system, which obviously becomes dangerous because we need our immune systems. But the problem is not the offending agents.
No, definitely not. I think if Ethan maybe puts where his nearest town is, if he's in the UK, I can help him find a holistic vet. There's so many. People always say to me that they don't have anyone near them and they just don't know who they've got near them.
No,
Because
absolutely,
they don't
absolutely.
advertise because they're so damn busy. They don't need to. So, you kind of, it is word of mouth a lot of the time, how they find their clients.
Absolutely. Ethan says the vet has also told him to buy a stronger ear cleaner, but it's painful. He doesn't like
Oh,
us
the
prodding
poor.
his ears, and
No, of
they are
course.
sensitive due to the yeast
Yeah,
infection.
I think yeah, I mean, yes, you need to find somebody. I'll help you find someone if possible, but I mean, you do need some relief there, and the dog's first propythium would give that for his, because you don't want this with him in pain. And if the steroids are being given and he's still got that, then they're like the ultimate thing to give, aren't they, the steroids? So, if they're not working, then
Yeah, it's a little bit
whether
surprising that the ears
yeah.
are still so painful when the dog's on when he sorry, we keep saying the dog. I don't know his or her name, but it's a little bit surprising that they're still that painful. But I think it's an important point to not
Mm,
force treatment on a
mm,
dog
mm.
with painful ears.
Poor Bubba.
The general recommendation in that situation would be for your vet to recommend to put your dog on paracetamol or something like that, just to take the pain. Please don't try and clean the ears if it's painful
No,
doing
no,
so.
no, I
That's
would.
inappropriate and unnecessary, and particularly a dog at that sensitive age, you want to be their friend and you want them
Yeah.
to trust you. It's an opportunity for some training, reward, and get them to like you touching the ears, but obviously that's not going to happen during the painful phase.
Mm,
But they'll need pain relief. It can be pain relief in the form of drops that you put in the ear, or it can be pain relief in paracetamols or others. I mean, steroids are quite strong pain relief in themselves, but you shouldn't put an ear cleaner into a painful ear. Full
mm.
stop.
No, exactly. Yeah.
That's inappropriate. So if you need to, go and see your vet again. It looks like you have an appointment in 6 weeks
I
to.
would go and see a much better vet.
Well,
Not
I
that,
think you need both in
you've
this stage. I mean, you
well,
need both.
I don't know now. I think you've been down that route. You've got the help that vet can offer. So now is the time to find a different opinion, really, a more natural, holistic opinion, I'd say.
I see it slightly differently. I think I would certainly stay with your local vet and I would follow their treatments, but I would also find someone who can advise regards acupuncture or homeopathy in terms of the allergy. But it's not one
Maybe
or the other. It's the two together.
But
But
yes, but it's a case of, do you rush off now to the traditional vet to get the pain relief, or do you go to somebody who can start looking at from the root cause? I mean,
I
that's
think
the
in this case
mm,
both.
mm.
Because you can't, the only thing that turns off pain just like that is either something
Yes, of course,
in the
yes.
ear that like a steroid eardrop, or paracetamol would be my recommendation. But it's best to do that through your vet. Don't
Yeah,
try and
don't.
do that yourself. Talk to your vet about it, but it shouldn't be painful, and you shouldn't be doing it if it's painful.
Mm.
That just ruins your relationship and makes it much harder to do
Mhm.
anything to those ears in the future.
Mm.
But definitely also contact.
Okay. Um,
Okay.
okay,
I think
cool.
Reagan
Well,
has
we've
forgotten that.
definitely
I
addressed
think
that.
we are Reagan-less this
Yeah,
week.
we
She
are
has
regular.
forgotten that we
That's
had an
fine.
appointment, I think.
That's fine.
Anyway, you'll have to make do with us. I'm just going to see if
So, did you have any other questions written
I
down?
have tons of questions. Let me
Right,
just
brilliant.
yeah. Ethan has not added anything, so I think that was that for now. Find a holistic vet. Don't put anything in painful ears. Um I have Lila and Sonia. I know we've covered this before, but there's a reason we keep going back to the same topics, because we keep getting the same questions, because they're obviously important topics that are, important to a lot of people. So apologies, we have talked about this before, but Layla and Sonia have asked about neutering. I wonder if I can find the exact.
As in whether to do it or not, do you think it was?
Yes,
Or
and the maybe the exact phrasing of the question doesn't matter. It was very similar. Let me see there. Here we are. Yes, Layla says, I was wondering if you have any information about neutering. I have a 6-year-old intact Chihuahua. I'm concerned about Pyometra. However, I'm not keen on having the ovaries and the uterus removed, as there seems to be a significant amount of evidence that removal of the ovaries can cause negative health in later life. Any information would be great, and if you have discussed this subject in a video, I'd be interested to watch, but not able to find it. Okay, we have discussed this before. All of our videos are on our YouTube channel, and we're in the process of naming them more clearly to make it easier to find the relevant information, because Layla's not the first person where we said it's in a video and come back to say, well, I can't find it. So we are we are aware of that. It's part of the format that we don't have a defined topic for each episode. We're kind of taking it loose and fast and chatting about whatever comes up. So we do need to label the episodes for those who go back and look for specific information. Sonia also writes about having a younger dog, and I think the point, I mean, Layla clearly has some awareness. She has a 6-year-old intact dog, and she's clearly aware that this is an issue, but also worried. Sonia, I haven't got the question in front of me, but it was very clear from the way she phrased the question that this is such a difficult decision, isn't it? You know, one worries and pros and cons and what should I do and what a big decision it is. And my main answer to that is actually no. It's nothing could be easier. This has been a conversation and possibly a difficult decision for about the last decade, but it is not a difficult decision anymore because all the information is in now, and we've got the WSAVA reproduction guidelines that has now been out for nearly a year and a half, that absolutely ultimately just tells everybody, you know, stop neutering, it's not safe. The experts have looked at all the evidence, don't do this anymore. So I just want to say that as clearly as I can. Deciding whether or not to neuter a healthy dog is, nothing could be simpler. It's not even a decision. It's not a choice. Why would you? It's so clear that it's dangerous, and it's not something that should even be considered. And the question then, the follow-up question, and someone was asking that as well, was about Pyometra. And the main reason when anybody considers neutering or are worried about having an intact female dog is, oh, but I'm worried about Pyometra. Pyometra is a womb infection, and it's a relatively common health issue in intact female dogs. It's not a problem in spayed dogs because either they don't have a uterus or they don't have ovaries, and so their uterus is completely inactive. It's not a good argument, but it's a very, very common one. And it's one that I think is worth talking about again and again, really, because part of the reason, it's a little bit odd when you start to think about why are we so scared of Pyometra? I think part of the reason is that it's been used, I think it's particularly an American concern. I mean, there is a divide between Europe and America on this whole neutering thing because we've traditionally done things in very different ways, and the UK is somewhere in the middle there, maybe slightly closer to the Americans. Special relationship going on, but because in America there's been such a cultural pressure to neuter for so long, it's just been, you know, that's been just hammered out again and again and again. You must spay and neuter, you must spay and neuter. And the fear of Pyometra has been used to convince everybody that that's what they must do. And now that we see that that was entirely inappropriate, it's a little bit hard to backtrack from this, or at least everybody's been so, I don't know,
led down the path.
and yeah, absolutely. And it's become such a fear. And it's just, I just think it's worth addressing that fear a little bit.
I mean, when you think of the amount of animals, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but out there in this world that they're just living wild in nature and they don't have this done and they're not getting pyometra left, right, and center, are they?
Sure. I mean, they're probably breeding a lot. And they're probably also dying younger, but I think it's
True.
an interesting thought. It's just there's nothing natural about neutering. There's nothing logical or natural. It's a very bizarre thing that we got into the habit of doing so much that we now find it difficult to let it go. But the whole idea of removing an organ so that it can never become ill in the future, once you
Mm.
just pause for a second to think about that, is
Mm.
bizarre. I
Well,
mean, we
yes,
should all,
actually, when you put it like that, it's like, oh, I better take my toes off in case I stub my
well,
toe.
yes. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. I mean,
I
sadly,
mean, was there a prevalence of this at one stage? Was there some kind of microbiome shift at the time that it was manifesting as pyometra? I mean, where's it
it's
all
an
come from?
interesting thing. I mean, the most important thing about this, I think, is that it's been addressed culturally so differently. In Norway and Sweden, no dogs are neutered practically. High 90% of dogs are intact. And pyometra is a relatively common condition and it's dealt with, but it's very, very rare that someone dies from it. It's like
Mm,
any other disease that a dog can have. We don't take away bladders to not get bladder
yeah,
infections. We
true,
don't take
true.
away, our appendix to not get appendicitis. I mean, there is a risk of disease and we're aware of it and we deal with it when it happens. So that whole mindset is just so absolutely upside down once you stop to think about it. But pyometra is it's an interesting diagnosis. It's an interesting disease. We don't understand quite why it happens or why it seems to have a strong genetic factor. It seems that the bigger the dog, the higher the risk almost. The dogs that have the highest risk are the giant breeds. Bernese mountain dogs are often cited. They have an extremely high risk of pyometra, but then Bernese mountain dogs, and I love Bernese mountain dogs, please forgive me, but Bernese mountain dogs have an extremely high risk of almost everything. Bernese mountain dogs have way more cancer than other breeds do. They're just high disease risk dogs. And we now know that when we neuter them, we dramatically increase that risk. So you're really shooting yourself in the foot if you're trying to protect your Bernese mountain dog or any other dog from pyometra by neutering it, because you're increasing their risk of cancers and autoimmune disease and a million other illnesses. If you want to keep them healthy, you must leave them intact. So the main thing about pyometra is to be aware of the signs. And if your dog is clearly unwell, not eating, maybe running a fever, lethargic, obviously you'd go to the vet and you'd catch it. And that's one presenting sign of if it's quite severe, acute pyometra. Another sign is a discharge from the vulva outside of the season. If there's a purulent discharge, a smelly discharge, but really a discharge of any kind, if it's away from her season, needs to be investigated. But we do need to approach this rationally and not through this filter of crazy fear. And I dug out some statistics. I mean, there are some reasons. Sorry, I'm saying three things at the same time, as I so often do. But I think one reason lots of people are afraid of pyometra is the fact that they remember a dog that died from this when they were a child or something like that. And the fear remains. And this was a bigger problem if we go back enough decades, before every veterinary clinic had an ultrasound scanner, before every veterinary clinic could run a blood test then and there and diagnose this within minutes. Now you can run bloods. We can look at we can see if there's an infection. We can do the bloods, we can do the ultrasound, and we know here and now whether this is a pyometra or not. 30 years ago, that was not the case. So it's easier to diagnose, it's easier to catch it early. That's a main thing. Also, I mean, when I started practice, the treatment for pyometra was surgery. You would go in and you would remove the uterus. These days, that can still be done, and it's done in severe cases, but it's also becoming much more common to just treat it using drugs. You give antibiotics alongside a hormonal treatment, and then you can do a couple of ultrasound scans and you can check that everything is healing up the way you want it to. And I was looking at some, I don't know if I can find them now, and the exact numbers probably not that important, but there was a meta-analysis done last year where they looked at all the different studies they could find about the treatment of Pyometra. And they looked at, one study had 174 female dogs with Pyometra that were treated with drugs. So there was no surgery, the uterus stayed, and 92% were completely cured and went on to have successful pregnancies later. So this is not a death, warrant. If your dog is diagnosed with Pyometra, this is not a dramatic thing. You treat them for a week, you have a follow-up scan, they're healthy, everything is fine, they can go on, they can breed normally. The severe cases that require surgery, there was another study that looked at those that said that of dogs that are operated on because of Pyometra, so dogs, they would per definition be the most severe cases where someone has made the judgment call that we don't think we can get away with antibiotics and hormones here, we really need to remove the uterus. Out of those, between 96 and 99.6% survived with no issues. So that means the risk of having the most severe case of Pyometra requiring surgery and dying from that is between 0.4% and 4%. So there's an incredibly high chance that your dog may never, your intact female dog may or may not develop Pyometra. If it does, it may not even require surgery. Most dogs are treated without surgery these days. If it's a really bad case and they do require surgery, there's up to a 99.6% chance that the dog will be absolutely fine. So this risk we all have that my dog is going to die from Pyometra if I don't neuter is so, words fail me. It's so out of proportion. It's ridiculous. It's not a real thing.
Well, this is it. And people are saying in the comments that their vets have sort of scared them, saying the dog would die in a few days of having the Pyometra. And I think this is where we have to be empowered to get other opinions, because that vet probably hasn't read the papers that Dr. Lise is talking about. Maybe
but I'm also really curious as to when they said that, because if they said it 2 years ago, then fair dues. We didn't know. This is very new information. Yeah. Because with the WSAVA guidelines, the experts, the world leading experts, sat down and looked at every single study that's ever been done, and then came to their conclusion. So, and which is also why I think this is not a decision for anyone to make. It's been made. The evidence is so clear. And vets who said other things a year and a half ago, forgive them. We didn't know any better. We didn't know what we were doing. We were wrong. Vets that say that now, and there has been, I can't remember who it was, maybe you can remember, because we have talked about this before, and someone was writing to us that they'd had the conversation very recently where they'd not even gone to ask about that. They'd been at the vet's for something else, and the vet had tried to pressurize them into neutering a young dog. And I thought about that afterwards, and I really think that's a reason for complaint. I think that should go to the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, because if a vet in 2025 pushes someone into neutering, that is clearly wrong information. That's just factually not correct, and shouldn't really be allowed to pass. And the discussion among vets is because there are people who still neuter, and it's not going to be allowed to continue. It's something that's being looked at, because we know now.
When the WSAVA changed this, how do they reach every single vet? What is their method for doing that?
I mean, it's, what are they saying? You can lead a horse to water, but you know, I mean, they're clearly not. And slowly is the is the
I
answer,
mean,
I
I'm
think.
guessing that wherever you're registered, they have your email, they have your contact details somehow, and they can reach vets all over the world and let them know that this is the conclusion. But that
It's
is
not an act. I don't
millions,
think it's an
billions
active.
of people.
I think if you're a vet and you're conscientious and you're well informed, the WSAVA is the highest veterinary source of unbiased, purely academic, factual information. But that doesn't mean that there aren't people here and there who disregard. I mean, there are people who should know better. I'm sure it happens in any profession. There are those that lead the way and follow the science, and then there are those that say, "I've been doing this for 50 years. No one's going to tell me what to do," and that's just that's just how it's going to be, isn't it? But there will be. I mean, it's such a big change. It's such a dramatic change that it takes a little while for everyone to take it in. But there will be repercussions for vets who keep practicing something that is clearly not allowable anymore. You know, it just can't go on, and it is something that is being discussed. But I think the main point to really put across is that it's not a matter of opinion. It's not that
It isn't.
I think one thing and another vet thinks another things. The experts have looked at all the evidence and said this very clearly, which is why for the individual carer, it shouldn't be a question. It shouldn't be a worry. It shouldn't be a concern. It's there is no choice to be made.
Yeah, yeah.
Neutering a healthy dog is madness. There's just no argument for it, really. Which is not the same as if you've got a dog with a problem. And someone else whose name I have somewhere was asking about whether false pregnancies was a good reason to neuter. And you can still come across vets who will say that if your dog has a tendency to be very affected during that progesterone dominated phase after a season, if they become ill, if they become anorexic, they get diarrhea or become very depressed or whatever symptoms they may have, you will still find vets who say, well, then that, in spite of the WSAVA guidelines, can be a reason to neuter. I disagree, but that's because as a homeopath, I know that homeopathy addresses that so beautifully, that I
But
would
also,
never recommend neutering for that reason.
no, and I think there's lots you can do for those dogs, isn't
Yeah.
there? Homeopathy being one of them, helping their liver, looking at their diet, how they're coping with their hormones, there's all sorts of things. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I wouldn't neuter for that reason, but that you can still come across, and I'm prepared to forgive colleagues who recommend that, because if they see a dog suffering and they don't see a way out of that, then fair enough. But I would absolutely not recommend that, because like Caroline says, there's lots of things that you can do. It's a fixable problem.
But there's also a heck of a lot of evidence to show that when you neuter, it causes more problems, you know, with growth plate hormones, with prevalences of cancers later on. And there's so many studies now, which obviously these experts looked at. And also we at the expo, we have Dr. Ruth Roberts, and she's going to be talking about sterilisation and neutering and what she calls is the syndrome of it, which is a hormone imbalance that she has studied and researched and wants to share with everybody at the expo. I think, if I remember without looking it up, it's called, you might know, Lise, if I get the name wrong, luteinizing hormone.
Luteinizing hormone, or LH.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
that's the problem. I mean, that's the mechanism behind why neutered dogs, male or female, are so ill. It's because there's normally a feedback system between the testosterone in males and estrogen and progesterone in females, and luteinizing hormone. It's a regulation that happens the whole time. It's a feedback mechanism, and when the primary when the sexual hormones are gone, because we've
Mhm.
used a scalpel and taken away the organs that produce them, the ovaries or the testicles, then that feedback system is broken, and then LH rises and rises and rises as the body's way to try and wake up, you know, try and call for progesterone or call for estrogen, call for testosterone. But because no one answers and the feedback mechanism never comes, then the levels of LH just rises and rises and rises to levels that have been shown to be 30, 40 times higher than there would ever be in a physiologically normal dog. And that's for the rest of their life. So the minute we neuter, we ensure that they will have crazy high LH levels forever. And we used to think that LH didn't do anything. We used to think that sex hormones were just about reproduction, but what's been demonstrated quite recently is that there are LH receptors all over the body, in the brain, in
Yeah.
hair, in skin, in the bladder, in every organ has got LH receptors, and that constant LH stimulation causes illness everywhere. So that's the mechanism behind it.
Yes, I think, well, Dr. Ruth's going to go into that in more depth at the expo. She's also talking about ways to reduce and mitigate that, so that if you do have a dog that's neutered, your dog may already have been neutered, often they're rescues, for instance, or shelter dogs are. So yeah, she's going to be talking about how you mitigate. And so that's going to be really exciting to hear, you know, because it's something new that we haven't necessarily thought about. I mean, as you said, it's a relatively new
It is
finding
very
that the
new.
receptors are everywhere. So yeah, the more I know, everyone who comes to the expo wants to do the best for their dog. So yeah, another thing for us all to think about.
And it is I think it is an interesting topic for the next, not even a decade, maybe the next decade. You know, is there something we can do for these dogs that were neutered?
Yeah.
But I think even more important than that, or it's not one or the other, but let's remember to just talk about the fact that we shouldn't neuter, because what really breaks my heart is when dogs are still neutered. And it still happens, not nearly as much as it did a year ago, but it still happens. I still get emails from people saying, but my dog was neutered last week and I've just heard this, what can I do? And it's just heartbreaking, because when, you know, last week everybody around that dog should have known better. For me, the very first issue is, let's talk about this, let's shout about this, everybody help each other, so that no other dogs, so that it doesn't happen again. You know, let's stop it happening first of all. That's the main thing. Then the issue of what do we do, you know, it won't be a conversation in 10 years. What do we do
Yeah,
with
because
those?
we
Because
will
there
have worked
won't
out
be
how
any
to.
neutered dogs
Mm.
around. There will be the odd few. It'll be like in Norway or Sweden, where everybody's intact and everybody's, you know, there will be a few, someone who've had severe pyometra, maybe someone who's had ovarian cancer, someone who's had testicular cancer. There can be other diseases in a male dog that may prompt neutering, but there will have been medical reasons, and someone will have made that assessment that yes, neutering is harmful, but this dog's health is actually suffering already. So
Yeah,
you know, it'll be in their interest.
yeah,
But what we're talking about is routine neutering of healthy dogs, and that should not happen anymore. And it's not a
yeah.
question anymore. It's not a decision anymore. It's easy peasy. Just don't do it. And don't fear. Pyometra is an illness like lots of other illnesses. I can't remember the last time I knew a dog that died from it. And I see dogs that have pyo and talk to carers of dogs with pyo every week. It's just a disease and it's treated and it goes away.
So
Um,
Michelle is saying that there's, yeah, Dr. Dobius, he spoke about this very thing at the
yes,
RFBS conference. However, Michelle, the reason I've got Ruth coming to the expo is because I have heard that the mitigation and the way to support a dog that's already been neutered, that's obviously at a loss or is getting too much of this, really, this luteinizing hormone, the mitigation things to do haven't been included yet in anything. So that was what I was keen on, because for me it's about, okay, we know the issue, where do we go with this? I don't want people to sit at the expo and be told, oh my god, your poor dog. I want
Hmm.
them to go, okay, this is the issue. Okay, so what can we do? How can we move forward from this? And that was what was really important to me. So, you know, I ummed and ahed on speakers. It's one of the reasons I took so long this year to kind of release all the speakers, because I really wanted to make sure that what everybody went home with was something that they could actually utilize and not go home with, oh goodness, there's all these problems with the industry, sort of thing, you know. We need the ways forward. We need solutions, don't we? Oh, look. Is this the
Someone's
first time
bored.
your dog has actually, is this the one that's normally behind?
Yes,
The
this is the
same
dog that you only ever refer to as Humpy Dog.
dog. Humpy dog,
This
yes.
is Humpy Dog.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, you're better than your reputation, aren't you? Yeah.
Oh, she is, of course. Of course, there's nothing wrong with humping, is there? What's her name?
Well, she's got a Danish name that's going to sound weird. She's called Man, which is kind of an old lady's name in Danish.
Oh,
We have a whole M thing. All my dogs have been called M names for a long time, so
bless her.
they're getting more and more interesting to find a name that begins with an M. I'm open to
So,
suggestions.
okay, no more questions in the comments. So any other quick questions while we've got some time? We've only got sort of 8 minutes or so, but we could
Oh, we're
probably
definitely
address the other one.
Reagan-less, aren't we?
She's definitely not going to turn up unless she
Reagan
thought
is
it
not
was
gonna,
7.
unless she got the
Yeah,
time wrong and she suddenly
yeah.
appears now. That has happened before as well. But I mean, she's in the UK, so it's not going to be a time difference thing. We've talked about Ethan's boxer. We've talked about Pyometra and false pregnancies and neutering. There were questions about we can almost guess the other very common
Puppy
topic.
vaccines.
Yes,
Well,
puppy
yeah,
vaccines and titer
yeah.
testing and the use of nosodes, and we have covered that a lot.
Lots
Um,
of times. And actually, I have a feeling if you go to the YouTube channel, I have watched one of those and written that down as one of the topics. So you should be able to
okay.
find them.
Holistic Vet Sisters YouTube channel, all the old videos and conversations are on there, and they are being the topics are being labeled. And can I just also
Oh,
plug
come
my book
on.
and say it is everything you need to know about dog vaccines and puppy vaccines and titer testing and nosodes
That's very
and
true.
neutering is in there. Yes,
So at the
absolutely.
expo, Dr. Nick's going to be talking about vaccines and immunity
That's
as
going to be
well.
amazing.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to understand vaccines and the vaccine industry, there is a great chat with Dr. Susan Humphreys, I think it is, online on YouTube, and she really breaks down her research. She was a very prolific high up kidney surgeon, doctor. I don't know if she was actually a surgeon, possibly she was, but yeah. And she came across issues, started researching them, was told very severely that she wasn't to go down that route if she was to keep her job and her position. And of course, what did she do but carry on researching and revealed what she could for us about the industry, and it's all in a book. Now, I'm not a shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but I'm not a massive fan of the cover. So I didn't buy it because I felt that after I'd watched the YouTube for 3 or 4 times and picked out the bits, you know, so I really understood what she was saying. Yeah, I think that you really need to understand more than just what you should do for your dog, I think, with this vaccine question, to really understand whether you as a person want to be part of that, I think, and understand what's going on. And she describes it very, very well in the way that you did earlier when we were talking about potential vaccinosis in the boxer, that, you know, it's about the immune system. When it is built organically, it is very discerning and it learns what it should and shouldn't react to. And when you're asking the immune system, forcing it to do things with a vaccine, it loses that ability to be discerning. So it then will see something that is relatively harmless or just is an everyday thing and go, whoa, you know, you're something I should react to. So it we need to have that. It's like it becomes overwhelmed. It's a little bit like you think, oh goodness, I don't know who I should talk to, who I shouldn't talk to, who should I listen to, and we need that alignment to have that discernment. So, and then when we get overwhelmed, we just don't know who to turn to, and we need to come back into balance. And that's the same principle with the immune system. We don't want to keep doing that to our dog's immune system. We want it to be able to grow organically off the basis of its mother's maternal immunity. But yeah, it is something we've talked about a lot. That we've only got a few minutes
I
now.
know. I wonder whether we've got 5 minutes because whenever we talk about the immune system, if I can just share the image I always see is um comes from Christopher Day, who was this
Oh,
brilliant
I loved it.
British veterinary
Yeah,
homeopath who we've
yeah.
sadly lost. And he was my teacher when I was learning homeopathy a very, very long time ago. And his story was, he says, think of the immune system like a soldier who stands guard outside of the gate of a village. It's his job. The village is the body, the village is you or me or our dog, and the soldier standing guard at the entrance to the village is our immune system. And his job is to find out who's allowed in, who's okay, who can come in, who's welcome, who's coming in to trade or visit or whatever, and who's an enemy, who's dangerous and should be stopped and should be denied entrance. That's the job of the immune system. It's that soldier standing at the gate. If you have an allergy, you have an incompetent soldier. You have someone who is nervous and skittish and can't tell the difference between friend and foe. He will shoot people who will kill people or attack people who are actually just coming to visit or maybe even bringing gifts, and he will just destroy them and not let them in. And enemies will, he will overreact. He will be trigger happy, overreacting, not being able to safely discern what's okay, what's dangerous. He'll just be shooting at inappropriate things like house dust mites or pollen or food items or whatever, because he doesn't realize they're not dangerous. He's supposed to be shooting at bacteria, virus, cancer cells, dangerous things, the enemies that we don't want to let in, but he can't tell the difference, so he attacks blindly. So that's if you have an allergy. Your soldier is incompetent, attacking when it's not necessary. If you have an autoimmune disease, the soldier is actually turned around and is firing into the village. He's shooting at himself. He's so confused. He doesn't even know which way he's supposed to be facing. So to me, that just always stayed with me as a nice image. What happens when you have an allergy? What happens when you have an autoimmune disease? And if you treat this soldier conventionally, the soldier being the immune system, the only thing you can ever do with conventional medicine is just tie him up. Say you are damaging, we can't let you do your job. You are overreacting and it causes damage. So we're going to tie you up. But when you do that, all the enemies are free to come in, which is why dogs on immunosuppressive treatments because of allergies have a higher incidence of cancer, yeast infections, all sorts of things, because the immune system is tied up and not able to protect them. But that's the only thing conventional medicine can do for allergies. What we need to do, and what holistic medicine can do when it's done properly by professionals, is educate this soldier properly. Sit him down and say, look, this is what's safe, this is what's not safe, have a go, see if you can work it out, learn and educate and learn to be able to tell the difference. And that is also why, if you're in the middle of that, educating the immune system, and then you go and give a dog a vaccine, for instance, he's going to go completely crazy again and start shooting everything around him. So that's just my very, very simplistic way of thinking about what is the immune system and what's the job that it's there to do, and what happens when it's not working, and what should we do about it.
Absolutely. Oh, Chris Day.
From Chris
Yay.
Day.
He was
Yeah.
great.
Okay.
Okay, so we've only got a minute, so I
Yeah.
think we call it an evening. And next week we're here, I think, with Bella, the nutrition vet. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes, we are. And then
Yeah.
we've got 2 weeks off, and then we're back in the new year.
Back in the new year with some lovely new guests.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us, and have a nice week. Let me see if I can turn